Hey beautiful, have you considered subscribing to our channel? Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. The sun rose higher in the sky, painting the suburban neighborhood with soft golden light. The air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. It was a perfect Easter morning, and all around me, families were gathering on their lawns, children's laughter filling the air as they eagerly searched for colorful eggs hidden in the grass. The smell of chocolate and the excitement of spring mingled in the atmosphere, creating a feeling of warmth and joy. My kids were excited, their faces glowing with happiness as they raced around our yard, baskets in hand, searching for the eggs I had hidden just minutes before. Their laughter was contagious, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to soak in the peace of the moment until I saw her. Karen. She wasn't just a neighbor, she was the president of the HOA, and she had made it clear, time and time again, that her role in the neighborhood wasn't just a position, it was a reign. Standing at the edge of my yard, her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the scene, arms crossed tightly over her chest. At first, I didn't think much of it. Karen was always lurking around, scrutinizing every detail of the neighborhood with a keen eye, looking for anything that could be a violation of her self-imposed rules. But as I saw her step closer, her expression hardening with each step, I felt a twinge of unease. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. I turned to face her, a smile on my lips, thinking she might offer a friendly comment about the Easter hunt. But as soon as our eyes met, I knew something was wrong. There was no warmth in her gaze, only a cold, condescending judgment. "Those eggs," she said, pointing to the bright pastel-colored plastics. "Eggs scattered across our lawn. They break HOA guidelines." I blinked, stunned, my mouth momentarily dry. "What? The Easter eggs?" I echoed, trying to process her words. "They're just plastic eggs filled with candy for the kids to find. It's an Easter egg hunt, Karen." She sniffed disdainfully, shaking her head. "The colors are too bright. They're too garish, too loud. They don't adhere to the HOA color scheme. It's a violation." I could feel my patience starting to thin, but I forced a smile. "Karen, we're just having a little fun. It's Easter." For crying out loud, her eyes hardened, her voice taking on a sterner tone. "I'm afraid this sort of behavior is exactly why the neighborhood is going downhill. Standards are standards, and I have to make sure they're upheld. If you're going to live in this community, you need to follow the rules." I opened my mouth to argue, but my kids, my two young children, ran up to me, their faces filled with confusion. "Mom, why, is she mad?" my son asked, clutching his basket tightly. Karen, apparently not noticing the hurt in their eyes, turned her attention back to me. "Your children are in violation too," she said sharply. Their behavior, rushing around, disturbing the peace of the neighborhood, could be seen as disruptive. I felt my stomach churn. I glanced at my kids, who were now standing there, clearly unsure of what was happening. Their faces, once full of joy and excitement, were now clouded with a sense of dread. And it wasn't just the kids. I could feel a knot tightening in my own chest, the familiar anger beginning to stir. "Karen, this is Easter," I said, my voice unsteady but firm. "What are you doing? You're ruining it for everyone." But Karen wasn't listening. She stepped forward, closing the distance between us, her tone growing sharper with every word. "You're lucky I'm giving you a warning, but this will need to be addressed. The eggs, the decorations, none of it fits within the acceptable aesthetic. The HOA has rules, and those rules must be followed." I stood there dumbfounded. I had known Karen to be petty in the past, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't just being difficult. She was actively seeking to ruin the happiness of an entire neighborhood, all in the name of rules. Her words hung in the air, suffocating the joy that had filled the morning. It was like a dark cloud had suddenly settled over our yard, blocking out the sunshine and stealing away the laughter that had once been so abundant. "I'll be keeping an eye on this," Karen said, her lips curling into a tight, satisfied smile. "Make sure it doesn't happen again." Before I could respond, she turned sharply on her heel and marched away, her high heels clicking against the pavement with an air of finality. I stood frozen in place, the weight of her words settling like a stone in my stomach. My kids were still, staring at me, their confusion turning into mild fear. I could see the hesitation in their eyes. They didn't fully understand what had just happened, but they could feel the change in the atmosphere. "What did she mean, Mom?" my daughter asked, her voice small, her eyes wide. "What was wrong with the eggs?" I knelt down to their level, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "There's nothing wrong with the eggs, sweetie. Sometimes people get upset over things that don't really matter." But the truth was, Karen's words had already sunk deep. There was nothing wrong with the eggs to her. This wasn't about the eggs at all. It wasn't about Easter, or fun, or the joy of the day. It was about control, about making sure everyone in the neighborhood bowed to her idea of how things should be. And I knew, deep down, this wouldn't be the last time Karen tried to pull this kind of stunt. As I watched her retreat, I felt my frustration turn into something darker. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. She couldn't get away with this. Not again. I wasn't about to let her ruin this for my family. But how to stop her? How to make sure this didn't happen again? For the first time, I realized that Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a problem. And I wasn't going to let her win. The neighborhood would never be the same again, and neither would I. I spent the next few hours in a haze, my mind racing as I tried to shake off the anger that had taken root. My kids were still reeling from the encounter, their excitement about the egg hunt completely shattered. We'd tried to salvage the day, but the fun was gone. Karen's words lingered, a heavy cloud in the back of my mind. HOA guidelines, standards. Who did she think she was? By the time the sun began to set, I couldn't stop replaying the confrontation in my head. Karen's smug face, her cold, calculated manner. It wasn't just a petty disagreement about Easter eggs. She'd made it personal. The HOA president, with her self-righteous need to control every aspect of our lives, had singled us out, and it wasn't going to stop with the eggs. I could feel it in my bones. This was the start of something bigger. I needed to think, to figure out what came next. But every time I tried to focus, I kept seeing my kids' faces that had gone from joy to confusion to hurt in a matter of minutes. And then it hit me. The eggs, the hunt, the color scheme, none of it mattered. What mattered was that Karen had targeted my family. She had chosen us as her victims. She had crossed a line, and she needed to be shown that no one got away with bullying my kids on my watch. The question was, how? I could already hear Karen's voice in my head, dripping with her usual superiority. "I'm just following the rules. You should thank me." I wasn't going to thank her. I wasn't going to sit back and let her get away with this. The problem was, Karen didn't care about me. She didn't care about us. She only cared about the HOA and the image she had so carefully crafted as the neighborhood enforcer. That's where the answer lay. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Her weakness was her ego, her desperate need to be seen as the hero. I was going to use that. I wasn't going to go toe-to-toe with her directly. That would only fuel her sense of power. I needed to hit her where it hurt the most. her reputation. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent stewing over my options, I began to put my plan into motion. I took my phone out and opened up my social media. It was time to take the gloves off. I posted a picture of my kids standing dejectedly on our lawn, their Easter baskets now filled with eggs, their smiles gone. The caption, short but effective, read, "When your neighbor, the HOA president, decides your Easter celebration is too garish. Show a Karen, trot yours Easter fail. Sure, family fun ruined." I didn't have to wait long for the reactions to start rolling in. Within minutes, the comments flooded in, many from neighbors who had witnessed the scene, some from people outside the neighborhood who had experienced similar HOA frustrations. People rallied behind us, sharing their own horror stories of overbearing HOA members, their voices joining in a chorus of frustration and solidarity. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real power would come from taking Karen's carefully curated image and turning it into something that she couldn't control. By the time the local news picked up the story, I could feel the momentum shifting. The post had gone viral, the hashtag trending as people shared their own HOA horror stories. The media jumped on it, a perfect storm of bad press for Karen. And when she finally saw it, when she realized what had happened, I could already see her losing her grip. I'd already seen the way she operated. It was all about control, all about being seen as the one who kept the neighborhood respectable. The way she strutted around, flaunting her authority, convinced that she was some sort of local hero. But that was just an illusion, and it was about to be shattered. I didn't expect her to come over right away, but sure enough, later that afternoon, I heard the unmistakable sound of her heels clicking against the pavement. I stepped outside just in time to see her storming across my yard, her face twisted in fury. "Take it down," she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. "Take it down now." I crossed my arms, not even flinching. "What's wrong, Karen? Can't handle the heat?" Her lips curled into a sneer. "You've made a mockery of me. You've ruined my reputation. I will have this post removed. You're not getting away with this." I felt a brief surge of satisfaction, watching her squirm. I had taken everything she stood for and turned it into something she couldn't control. The damage was done, and it was too late for her to fix it. "I think it's too late for that," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You should have thought about your reputation before you decided to ruin my kids' Easter. This isn't about a few colorful eggs anymore, Karen. This is about how you've treated people in this neighborhood. It's about power, and you've abused it." She glared at me, her fist clenched at her sides. "You have no idea what you're messing with. This will come back to haunt you." I raised an eyebrow. "Maybe, but I'm okay with that." Karen stormed off without another word, her heels clicking louder than ever. I watched her retreat, feeling a strange sense of victory rise inside me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen wasn't the type to give up without a fight. She'd come at me again, and when she did, I had to be ready. In the back of my mind, I could already feel the next move coming. But for now, I let myself breathe. We had won this round, and when the HOA board met next, Karen's little reign of terror was going to come to an end, one way or another. The days following the viral post felt like a slow burn, the tension building as the internet continued to buzz with support for my family. Our story spread far beyond the neighborhood, and Karen's carefully polished image started to crack. The more people shared their own HOA horror stories, the more it seemed that Karen's reign of petty control had left a wake of resentment in its path. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months reached out, their messages filled with stories of Karen's overbearing demands. each one more absurd than the last. At first, Karen tried to maintain her usual authoritarian demeanor. She showed up at our door, her usual airs of confidence barely masking the panic that now sat behind her eyes. The threat of legal action had become her go-to response. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she told me in a voice laced with venom, as though I had somehow violated some sacred contract by speaking out. But I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. What she didn't understand was that I wasn't the only one tired of her dominance over our lives. The more she lashed out, the more people began to speak up. A neighbor from 2 streets over, who had always kept a low profile, joined in, sharing that she had been threatened with fines for having unapproved landscaping. A couple down the block posted a photo of the ridiculous amount of paperwork they'd been forced to fill out just to replace their broken mailbox. It was as if Karen's reign of terror had been exposed. And now the floodgates were open. The next HOA meeting was set for the following week. Karen, no doubt, was planning her counterattack. She was probably already drafting letters, preparing her argument, ready to play the victim. I could already hear her rehearsing it in my head, how she'd present herself as the misunderstood guardian of the neighborhood, how she'd twist the narrative to make me look like the troublemaker. But I wasn't about to sit back and let her rewrite the story. This time I was ready. I began gathering my own evidence. I had screenshots of Karen's past interactions with neighbors, including the threats she had made about violating the HOA's supposed rules. I started organizing a petition with signatures from families who were fed up with her overreach. The more I collected, the clearer it became that I wasn't the only one who felt suffocated by her power trip. There were dozens of people ready to take a stand. People who had felt too intimidated to speak up before, but now saw a chance to push back. On the morning of the meeting, I could feel the nerves tightening in my chest. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. This was about the neighborhood, the families who had quietly suffered under her tyrannical rule. This was about reclaiming a sense of community, about making sure that no one else would ever feel the way my kids did on Easter morning. As I walked into the meeting room, I took a deep breath and steadied myself. The room was already filled with familiar faces. Karen stood at the front, her arms crossed, her expression set in its usual look of smug superiority. But today, there was a shift in the air. People were talking, whispering to one another, their voices tinged with quiet defiance. It was as if the whole room had been transformed into a battlefield. Karen's eyes locked onto me as I made my way to a seat. For a moment, I thought I saw something close to fear flicker behind her gaze. She quickly masked it, her posture straightening as she addressed the room, her voice smooth but tinged with nervousness. "We're here today to discuss some of the concerns that have been raised," she began, glancing around the room with what I could only describe as an attempt at control. As HOA president, it's my responsibility to ensure that the rules are followed and that the integrity of our neighborhood is maintained. She went on to speak about supposed violations and neighborhood aesthetics, her voice dripping with condescension, her words carefully chosen to make herself appear as the reasonable party. I could see the others, some of the same neighbors who had once feared her, shifting in their seats, their faces tightening as she spoke. I could feel the tide beginning to turn. Then it was my turn. I stood up, holding my notes in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. I was ready. The moment was here. I'm sure we all appreciate Karen's dedication to neighborhood standards. I began, my voice firm, though calm. But I think it's important that we address what's really been happening here. What's been happening is not about rules. It's about intimidation. It's about fear. And it's about a single person using power to control others. The room went quiet. I could see Karen's face tighten, her jaw clenching. But I wasn't going to let up. For those of us who've been living here for a while, I continued, Karen has made it her mission to impose her personal preferences on the rest of us. Whether it's about our lawn decorations, the colors of our front doors, or, yes, our Easter egg hunts, she's used her position to punish people for nothing more than having a little fun. I paused, letting my words settle in the room. I'm not alone in this. In fact, I've spoken with a number of neighbors who are ready to speak up about how Karen has manipulated the HOA guidelines to her advantage, how she's used fear tactics to control us. I stepped forward, holding up the petition I'd compiled. We've had enough. These signatures are from families in this neighborhood who want to see change, who are tired of living under constant scrutiny. Karen's face reddened, but she didn't interrupt. This isn't about breaking the rules, Karen, I said, my voice growing stronger. This is about using those rules to break people. It's time for all of us to stop letting one person hold us hostage to her whims. We deserve better. There was a long pause. The air in the room had shifted. People were talking now, softly at first, but with more confidence. It was as if a dam had broken, and the flood of resentment had finally found its voice. I could see Karen's facade cracking, her anger bubbling to the surface, but she held it together, for now. But I knew something had changed. The control she once wielded with such ease was slipping away, and she didn't have the power to stop it. The vote was called, the room filled with murmurs, as everyone prepared to make their decision. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't just about winning. It was about the beginning of something new, something that wouldn't be defined by fear anymore. The tide had turned. The room fell silent as the votes were tallied. I stood there, watching the board members exchange glances, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew this wasn't just about an HOA meeting. It was about so much more. It was about standing up for my family, for my kids, for everyone in the neighborhood who had been too scared to speak up. It was about taking control of a situation that had been festering under the surface for too long. Karen, for the first time that day, looked nervous. The usual air of arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a tight-lipped grimace. She wasn't the center of attention anymore. For the first time in years, the power had shifted. The board president, a calm but weathered man named Mr. Simmons, cleared his throat. The results are in. A majority of the votes have been cast in favor of... But before he could finish, Karen's voice cut through the room like a blade. This is ridiculous. You can't let these people undermine everything I've worked for. Her face was flushed with fury, her hands trembling as she slammed her papers on the table. I will not be dismissed like this. You all know the rules. You're breaking them. I think you've had enough time to talk, Karen, Mr. Simmons said, his voice low and unyielding. The vote has been cast, and the decision is final. The board members nodded in agreement, their expressions serious. The tension in the room was suffocating. Karen, her chest heaving with barely contained rage, looked like she might explode. You've been removed as HOA president, Mr. Simmons continued, his words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Effective immediately. It was a moment I had waited for, but hearing the words still struck me with a rush of disbelief. Karen, who had held so much power for so long, had been ousted. Her grip on the neighborhood, her reign of fear, had come to an end. Karen's face twisted in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing as if trying to process the enormity of the situation. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, the anger broke. Free! her voice rising to a pitch that made the walls shake. "This is a mistake. I'm the one who kept this neighborhood together. Without me, you'll all fall apart. You'll regret this." Her eyes darted around the room, desperately seeking support, but all she met was cold silence. Her desperation was almost palpable. She had no allies left. I didn't need to say a word. The room had already spoken. Karen had been exposed for what she was, a bully hiding behind the guise of authority. Her downfall was swift, and in front of an audience that had once feared her. The walls she had built around herself crumbled. I had won, we had won, but just as quickly as it began, the meeting was over. The board members filed out, their faces grim but satisfied. The air felt lighter. As I stood there, the weight of the victory finally began to sink in. It wasn't just about Karen's removal. It was about the countless people she had silenced over the years, the families who had lived in fear of her wrath. It was about sending a message that no one, not even someone with a title or position, had the right to treat others as though they were beneath them. I stepped out into the hallway, my heart still racing. I had done it. My family had done it. And in the process, we had done something for everyone who had been afraid to speak up. But as I reached the door, ready to go home and finally relax, I heard a voice behind me. "You think you've won? Don't. You?" Karen's voice, now low and full of venom, cut through the calm. I turned slowly to find her standing in the doorway, her eyes dark with fury. It was the first time I had seen her so broken, so vulnerable, but there was still a cruel edge to her words, a dangerous spark that hadn't quite gone out. "You don't understand," she hissed, stepping toward me. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot. You may have gotten rid of me, but you'll regret this. You'll see. You'll all see." I stood my ground, meeting her gaze without flinching. "No, Karen," I said, my voice calm and firm. "It's over. You're done, and you're not going to hurt anyone anymore." Her expression twisted into something grotesque. For a moment, she looked as though she might lunge at me, but then she paused. The fight drained out of her, replaced by something more dangerous, an almost resigned kind of rage. "You think you've beaten me? You don't know who you're messing with," she spat, her voice trembling now. I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, and that's why I'm walking away from this. You, on the other hand, well, you've got nothing left. I turned and walked out of the room, my steps echoing in the empty hallway. Behind me, I could hear Karen's voice rise once again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't the confident, powerful tone she'd always used. It was a shriek of pure frustration, the sound of someone realizing they had no control anymore. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment wash over me. It felt like a new beginning. The anger and tension that had gripped me for so long were gone, replaced by a quiet sense of satisfaction. But just as I was about to get in my car, I heard the telltale sound of my phone buzzing in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a notification, a viral post, this time one of Karen's own neighbors, showing a picture of her storming out of the meeting, her face contorted in rage. The caption read, "HOA, Karen finally gets what's coming to her. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." I couldn't help but laugh. Karen's legacy, her carefully constructed persona, had been reduced to a punchline. The video was already gaining traction, and in that moment, I realized that not only had we reclaimed our neighborhood, but we'd also won something bigger. The satisfaction of watching someone who had thought they could break others finally break themselves. As the post gained views, shares, and comments, I felt a quiet sense of victory settle in my chest. This wasn't just about getting rid of Karen. It was about showing the world that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't just feel good, it feels right.